I am live. Hooray. Welcome to Growing Gratitude. I'm Becca Lori Hector, your host of Growing Gratitude, here every Sunday, where we talk about the challenges of being an autistic adult alive right now, how we make our way through those things, and then, of course, all the little glimmers in between that keep us motivated and going as we get through our daily lives. So welcome to Growing Gratitude. It is a rainy day here in Maine. A low energy, cozy day. And we are going to talk about some stuff. And as usual, I have some idea of what that stuff is, but not all of the ideas of what that stuff is. Some of it I process as I talk to you guys. So here we are on this lovely day. And I think what I want to talk about is something that I did this week, I guess it is. Yes, it was just a couple of days ago. And I learned some lessons from it. And it was also something that was out of the ordinary for my usual, like out of my routine. So interesting thing to talk about. And that is that this past Friday was Disability Pride here in Maine. It was in a lovely park by the water. In Augusta, and I had volunteered to go and table for Disability Pride for an organization. So I'll talk first a little bit about that, and then kind of what happened and all of it. So when everything went down in the world in January, you may remember that I talked a lot about, well, what do we do with this energy, right? Like I don't have a lot of control over a lot of things. And we were out of control and continue to be out of control of a lot of the decisions that are being made about us and the conversations about us out in the world. And in particular, for the autism and neurodiversity community, we know that we have a huge overlap, bigger than the rest of the population, with the LGBTQ community. And so something that many nonprofits have not yet addressed, but need to address, right? If you're working within the autism sphere or neurodiversity sphere, you need to be as educated and as open to about LGBTQ issues, and vice versa. If you are working in the LGBTQ space and you have not gotten an education around autism and neurodiversity, you're not really supporting that community, right? So a little bit of that, right? And then the politics happened and I felt really unempowered. And so one of the ways that I took back my power during that time was to reach out to a small organization here in Maine called Out Maine. Shout out to Out Maine. They're an organization that supports our queer and trans youth here in Maine. And when everything went down, all I could think about were the kids, right? Like, it's one thing that the entire trans community and the autistic community, but first the trans community was attacked, right? But it's another thing for kids who are living their lives for the first time, right? And they're going through their challenges and understanding of their selves and their self-awareness, that they should have to take the brunt of everything that the grown-ups have decided to destroy in the world, right? And that feeling was so raw for me as someone who grew up, right, in a very similar kind of group, a group that was marginalized, ignored, invisible, really, right? And so I reached out to Out Maine. I said, I'd like to volunteer, right? I can do any number of things. I work in nonprofit. I'm happy to do presentations. I'm happy to teach around autism and neurodiversity for your group, whatever. But I can't do anything about the current politics. But what I can do is support the next generation of human beings that have the capability to change the world, right? I can do that. So starting back in January, I started volunteering and doing some things with them. Well, they asked, would somebody be available to go to Augusta and do Disability Pride Day, our table at Disability Pride? And I thought, well, how convenient for Becca, right? Not only could I volunteer and do my volunteer time for Out Maine, but I could also be at Disability Pride, which I might just want to go to anyway, right? And I've never been to Disability Pride in Maine yet. So way back when they asked, would someone volunteer? I said, sure, I'll do a few hours at your table, no problem, right? I've done a gazillion nonprofit tables in my career. So I'm happy to do that, right? And I said yes. And so that was this past Friday. I was excited to be able to go and be part of our community and spend time with other folks in our community that are disabled, that are um, allies to the disabled community, all of that. It was amazing to be able to see the amount and variety of different organizations that were there supporting the disability community in Maine, because Maine is, we're a big state with a smaller population, and so it's an interesting dynamic, right? It's very hard as a nonprofit to cover the whole state of Maine because it's gigantic, right? When most of the population lives down by Massachusetts. So it's a really interesting thing to see the way that organizations respond to that, to see the way that people are there. So there were a lot of people showing up. There was music, there was pizza, there were t-shirts for sale, the usual type items that you'd expect to see at any other Pride event, right? Um, and so that's what went on. And so it was, I had first shift. So I got there in the morning, we set up the table, and then I had to sit there for like a couple of hours, right? And just kind of help at the table, and then that was it. That, I could spend more time there, I could leave, I could do whatever I wanted. And so it was really just a great way to, as an autistic person, having a job. This is the other piece of it. As an autistic person, having a job to do to when you go to an event like this is very helpful, right? Like, hard for me to just go to Disability Pride to just go. Easier for me to go to Disability Pride because I'm tabling and volunteering my time for someone. And then I can stay if I want to stay because I have a job, and that removes for me some of the social discomfort. Like, I have a reason to be there, right? And I think that, of course, that's linked to never feeling like I belonged anywhere, right? If you have a job to do, you certainly belong where you're supposed to be, right? So that's a whole other, we could go down that rabbit hole whenever we want. Because belonging is a big, huge word in my life, right? And so you can see that little remnants of never feeling like I belong, right? So that I need to have a job, a reason to be there, right? And that happens even in family events for me, where I never even felt like I belonged in those events. So even still to this day, when I do family events, or like if I have to go to a wedding or something, it's just like I'd rather have a job, or otherwise I don't feel like I don't belong there. Right. So now let's go flash forward again to Disability Pride. And so we went to table. I was paired up with two really lovely people. One of them I really didn't get a chance to talk to. She was our shift change. And the other person I sat with for our 2 hours, and she was so lovely. And I was just comfortable. We were both, I think, very comfortable in our silence, which is often uncomfortable for some people. But at Disability Pride, I think we um, have allowances around sitting in silence, right? Sometimes, because there's a lot else to take in at this event. So I did there, and I sat in my 2 hours, and it was great. It was so good to see our community together. It was so great to see in today's day, with everything that's going on, to see so many people being open and joyous, and happy to see each other, and happy to be spending time together, and happy to be openly disabled, and just showing our numbers, and having our voice out there, that you can't, make us disappear by just saying we're gone, right? That's not what happens. And so that was all really nice. There we Of course, there's the nonprofit people that are there, but then of course there's some vendors and things, and folks that are part of the disability community selling their wares and things like that. And I bought a great sticker from a neurodivergent person, and kind of really that was it for me, and I went on my way. So that is the um the facts, ma'am, about what happened, right, at this Disability Pride event. I'm glad I went, did all the things I wanted to do, accomplished all of that. But, and this is what I've been hanging on for you guys, been hanging on to this piece for you guys, um is that if I have to be honest about doing what I did on Friday, there was a lesson in there for me, which is that I forgot for myself just how hard tabling events is for me. Um, and so while I'm so glad I went and I'm totally fine with how it went down, all of those things, like no regrets kind of thing. But big reminders about the things that are hard for me at these kind of events, right? Um, so a while back, I wrote an article about the different kinds of advocacy, about there is no one way to advocate, right? We do advocacy in lots of different ways. The way that I do it publicly like this is not the only way to do advocacy. There's plenty of really private and personal ways to do advocacy. You can do it some of the time, not all of the time, all of that stuff. And in fact, just simply existing as an openly autistic person is advocacy in and of itself, right? But I forgot for myself just how hard tabling events kind of advocacy is for me. And here I thought, let me volunteer my time. I will give away some of my time to do this thing. But in it was this lesson for me, this reminder that tabling events is really hard for me. There's a couple of different reasons for it, and they make a lot of sense. First of all, especially with an outside event, right? There's not a lot of control around where your table ends up in the scheme of things. So you can end up either really close to the music or really close to the food or in the sun or in the wind or in any number of strange spaces. But wherever it is that your table ends up, that's where you are, right? Somebody had to set up and organize and put everybody for where what they paid for, right? And there's a map. And so you are at your table, right? And it's your job when you sit at that table to talk to all the people that come by, to be nice to them, to give them pamphlets, any freebies you have on your table, to make sure they know about your organization and how to find your organization, right? Um, and that kind of thing, right? So for me, I tried to dress as comfortable as possible, knowing that there were other parts of this event that I wouldn't be able to control, right? Um, so I dressed really comfortably, didn't think at all about what I looked like, just dressed for comfort, right? Um, I brought a lot of items with me to take care of myself, both for my POTS, because I was going to be outside, but also for my autism and things like that. So I had hat and I had sunglasses, but I also had my electrolyte drink and a couple of other things with me, right? I did best as I could to prepare for the unexpected and wherever I would end up. Well, sure enough, while we were lovely put under a pavilion in our table, the sun was coming from behind. So the sun was at my back for the full 2 hours that I had to sit there. Okay. I got up a couple of times and took a break. But I was in the sun. And so, of course, that messed with my autism and the light and the whole situation. But it also was very hot. And that made me uncomfortable, right? And we were also squished into like a half table instead of having a whole table to ourselves. So we were two people in a spot that really they needed only one person for, right? And while that's fine, most people were fine, right? Of course, as an autistic person, that feels very, um, I don't know, too close, right? Too much in my space, or I feel like I'm in your way and other people's ways. So that whole experience, right? Just very uncomfortable for me. Um, and so, but we did all that, right? And then there's all the social that goes along with it, right? And all of those things. And so by the time that it was all over, I was really ready to leave. And it was only like 2.5 hours of time, right? It took about an hour to drive there and an hour back. So it's 2 hours of driving, but also it was only like 2.5 hours at this event. Right. But the minute the music started, I had to put in my earplugs and I watched the other autistic people that were at the Autism Society table next to me have to double up their headphones. I saw a bunch of other, right? There's a point where, and it's fine because that's what most people want. That's what we're there for. We're there to make noise, right? So that people know that we're there and they stop by and they see. That's the point of a Pride event, right? Is that people have to stop and look and pay attention, right? So it's not, I'm not criticizing, right? It's just one of those things as an autistic person, we have to know to anticipate, right? At these kind of events. And I did, and I had my earplugs, but that wears us down, And I guess that's the part that I maybe forget, is that when I take the sun at my back for 2 hours, and I take the fact that I have to socialize and be nice because I'm representing another group, I'm not there representing myself, right? And then it's loud, right? And there's a lot of distractions and things happening, right? And a lot of people, and all of that. And so that smushed together, of course, is that combo plan for autistic people is exactly what we try to explain all the time. Like, I can do that, but I can only do it for a very short period of time, right? I can only tolerate it and sustain it for a very short period of time. Whereas other things I can tolerate for longer periods or do for longer periods of time that are not as intense for me, not as intense an experience. And so what I realized was 2.5 hours was like plenty. I could have been done at an hour, right? And been over it. And so my big takeaway from this is I really can't table events anymore. And I shouldn't table events, right? Because what I can do lots of other kinds of advocacy, and I do, right? But tabling for me messes with my disability. So here I am trying to be loud and proud about my disability, and all I want to do is like succumb and hide from it, right? So that's not effective advocacy, not for me and not for the groups that I'm advocating for, right? It doesn't put me in an effective place. Whereas when I'm teaching or doing a podcast interview, or I write an article, right? That is my best foot forward. And so I'm really doing us a service when I advocate in the ways that are my strengths, right? Because I'm doing my best, the thing that I'm best at, and it puts our community in the best light, and that's advocacy, right? And so what I really had to think about on the ride home was how important it is that these events happen, and how not all of us can advocate in those scenarios, right? That um, I serve a purpose and advocacy in a different capacity, and this isn't the capacity that's right for me, right? So the big lesson was it's been years since I tabled an event. Okay, years since I made myself go to a crowded place like that, right? And there's reasons for it, obviously, right? That's my disability. That's my personal brand of autism. Those are my limitations, right? And I really respected that. But then I thought in this one, oh, let me just, right? Let me just, and then we always need those reminders every once in a while, right? Of let me just try. And no, nope, still can't do that. Right. And so that's really what the lesson was for me in this whole scenario. I'm glad I went because I needed to be reminded of that piece. And also, I'm still glad that I volunteered, and that do volunteer for Outmain. I love the work that they're doing, and I hope to find a way that I can give my time and energy to them in a capacity that is a little bit more um, aligned with who I am and what I'm capable of, right? But that's not there for it. That's me. I volunteered for it. All of that stuff. It's all part of the lesson, right? The reminder that um, even on our best days, we still have limitations and we need to respect them. So, it's important that I talk about all of that because I think a lot of people think that there is only one way to advocate. I think that a lot of people truly believe that it's black and white, that there is a right way to advocate and a wrong way to advocate. But there are so many different capacities of advocacy and so many different ways that we can show up in the world and still do service to our community that doesn't look as direct as sitting at a table and volunteering for an event, right? That can look a lot of different ways. Even, I guess, if I wanted to be whatever about it right now and really point myself out as an example, even just sitting here today and doing gratitude with you guys and giving Outmean a shout out and Disability Pride a shout out, right? In this way, right, is even a little piece of advocacy, right? And so I guess the takeaway for all of you guys from this whole scenario is think about your advocacy. Are you advocating in a way that is aligned with self? Are you advocating by utilizing your strengths? Or are you pushing on your challenges, right? And when you're advocating, are you really doing service to the community, for the community, or are you doing it, right? Sometimes we do things to make ourselves feel good, right? And my lesson from all of this is I, right, am happy to give so much of my brain energy to whomever. I'm happy to teach. I'm happy to help people with research. I'm happy to help people with writing and those kind of things. But the physicality of certain parts of advocacy is where I am challenged. I am not useful in, a pride type event, in a group event. That is not a space in which I service my community the best. And so that's my personal lesson, but it's also my reminder to you guys that advocacy looks different for everyone. And there's no right or wrong way to advocate. That we can do it in little small ways every day, and then in big ways every once in a while, right? That's really, I hope, the takeaway from it. But in any case, that is my little story for today, my little discussion for today's gratitude. Just wanted to really share with you that experience and sort of how it tied all of these different things together. That little piece in there about belonging and not feeling like, um, still all these years later, still internally seeking that feeling of belonging in spaces is something I need to explore some more, right? It's something that's sitting there dormant. Um, and there's something to it that's attached to all of this. For me. And so if you are following me on Patreon, if you are a subscriber in the Growing Gratitude tier, which is there to support this live stream every week, I think I'm going to talk about it in my journal entry. Maybe not this week, but like I said, I wrote my one for this week. I had so much to say. So I think I'm going to go into it a little more the next time, or maybe, and it might become a bigger article than even that. I might kind of explore it more for like a LinkedIn article, but I'm going to start with a Patreon entry. So if you're interested in sort of that exploration of where that little piece, what's that about? That belonging piece. I'm gonna, I think, delve into it on Patreon. So please, in the links to the down below of my little video, here's all the links to my stuffs. Patreon is down there, the book is down there, the course, my website, all of those things. But if you're interested in kind of going on the deeper journey with us more than once a week here, I do support Growing Gratitude with a journal entry, and where I communicate in that vein, and try to support the things we're talking about here. So that's that, a little bit more into the inner workings, I guess, of my private life and on the Patreon if you're interested. So I hope you will head over there. And if you enjoy the YouTube channel, if you enjoy the live streams, feel free to go over and become a Growing Gratitude member of the Growing Gratitude tier, whatever we are. Gratitude Growers tier. That's what it is. There, it came back. All right. Anyway, you guys, with that, I'm going to say that's it for this week's Growing Gratitude. And it is my reminder to you to please, please, please take care of your meat suit, right? And please protect your headspace with all of your ness, and keep your eyes, ears, nose, mouth, hands, everything open, wide open, to all of the glimmers, big and small, out there, because without the glimmers, we don't have a reason to get up every day. So make sure that you keep your eyes out, because they're your fuel. I will be back next week, next Sunday, 10 a.m. Eastern time, live right here on YouTube, talking about whatever comes my way this week. I can't wait to see you then. And in between, of course, you can always find me out and about on the interwebs. I will see you guys next week. Have a good one. Bye.